Today on my podcast, Different Matters, I am here today with David Cohen, talking about his book that he wrote with Rebecca Keillor. This is a book, he calls it The Untold Stories. There have been a number of books written about Jacinda Ardern, most of them, I think, not much better than hagiographies. David has looked into the data, he's looked into what Jacinda Ardern actually did, how she governed, and how a lot of people around Jacinda Ardern have responded to it. It's an excellent interview. I enjoyed it. And at the end, we discussed libertarian philosophy, and David asks whether I am in fact a libertarian and poses the awkward question about whether stuff uses me just as a token. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Thank you. I'm here today in the excellent studios of Matrix in Mount Cook with David Cohen. David, you've written a book, Jacinda, The Untold Story, with yourself and Rebecca Keillor. There's been a number of books on Jacinda Ardern. Most of them have been written, it might be unfair to describe them as hagiographies, but I think that's, and Rebecca and Jacinda has written one of her own. What was the difference in your perception of Jacinda Ardern? Because you've met her before, you voted for her in 2017. Did you vote for her in 2020?
No, 2020, not 17.
Oh, you voted for her in 2020, not 2017?
The COVID election.
We'll get into the book, but how has your perception of Jacinda Ardern changed as a result of writing the book?
Well, in the first instance, I wanted to do a book, not a political biography. I've done a book on Jim Bolger.
Yes.
So now with an Ardern one,
You got to interview Jim Bolger, though.
Yeah. So that's one kind of biography when it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
And Jim and I spent months, nearly a year, every Friday or other Friday, talking about his life and times in the world at large. And that was entirely the right way to do it. It's a great legacy work now that he's died. With Jacinda, and the idea of doing something about her had been bubbling away for some time. I felt that we had heard abundantly from her, and we'd heard abundantly from her supporters, some of whom are, I would say, cultists. So that presented immediately a different challenge to Jim Bolger. With Jim Bolger, there were issues like Catholicism, his Irish background, his diplomatic experience, which he hadn't really talked about a lot.
This is after he left office.
After he left office. And, of course, his premiership. I felt that I was bringing his voice in on relatively new matters. The Great Depression, that was another. With Ardern, we've had a superabundance of testimony from her. Naturally, I approached her twice for an interview. Well, in fact, it would not have been an interview. It would have been 15 or 20 interviews.
Yep.
And it would have produced an entirely different book because I would have had to have done justice to what she said across an array of subjects. Her turning me down was a deliverance because that enabled me to bring in the voices we hadn't heard from, which is to say rank and file New Zealanders, lawyers, accountants, people on the street, some well-known names, particularly in politics and to a lesser extent punditry, but an awful lot of the people, voices in the book, are voices that we hadn't heard from. And that was important to me as a journalist.
So how did I'm interested in the contrast between, at the start of the book, what you thought about Ardern, and after writing the book, how has your perception of her changed? Or has it changed? Do you still have the same view of her than you did when you started?
No, and you can't. Like, we meet people in life and we come away with a different view almost every time. I came away with a different view of you. I've met you the third time we've met. It's just the chemistry of human beings. And if you spend 2 years intensely focused on a person, if your views haven't changed, then you've done something wrong. So to answer your question, I came out of the exercise liking her more.
Okay, interesting.
And respecting her less.
Okay.
And I'm happy to elaborate on either.
Okay. All right. I'll come back. I like that. Let's talk. We've heard a lot about Ardern's life, the fish and chip shop, Morrinsville. You talk about her Mormonism, and there are a couple of aspects to that I think is interesting. One, the idea of kindness, and the other, the way she left the faith, the trigger point for the reason that she left, which was essentially the homosexuality. She couldn't reconcile that in her mind. But let's just and I think the other really interesting thing, because you talk about Bodleian Catholicism, you're right that although, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, although Ardern left Mormonism, she never really stopped being culturally Mormon.
Oh, yeah, I would say, like lapsed Catholics, she left the church didn't leave her.
Yeah.
And I think it's a pretty familiar stupidity in New Zealand, or journalistic stupidity, to think that because somebody parted company with the church,
yeah,
as she did painfully on the issue of gay marriage, she sincerely opposed the church's position, and leaving the club and the home and the environment that she'd been, sired in, took a lot of courage. It's one of the things I like about her. But the notion that she thereby did away or repudiated everything she'd hitherto believed to be true is nonsensical. Human beings don't operate like that unless they're geniuses or philosophers, neither of which she is.
Sociopaths, which she wasn't.
Or sociopaths, yeah.
Because you describe her family, I think, as being almost the only Mormons in, was it Morrinsville, which must have been a somewhat confronting and isolating perspective. Her going on her mission, which again, I imagine that would be, for a young person, that would be a cathartic and not in a good way.
Just embarrassing, as well as the rest.
Yeah. And that must have formed a separation between herself and everybody else. Almost loneliness may be the wrong word, but there was that would create an otherness in yourself, I would imagine, that seems to have stayed, if we're going to psychoanalyze her. But the other thing was kindness, because you make the point that kindness is a key aspect of Mormonism.
Absolutely.
And that obviously has become a huge part of her brand, both whilst in office and subsequently.
Yeah, kindness. I could make a list of about 20 key attributes of Mormonism.
Yeah.
And Jacinda would tick off most of them. Kindness being one, it was a foundational value of Joseph Smith, who said, kindness is our religion. And politicians have used the word kind before. George Bush, the elder, talked about a kinder, gentler politics. But Jacinda gave it a currency that we haven't seen much in any democracy.
Well, I mean, it ended up cutting both ways.
Absolutely.
Because there was
the
a
standard
steel
by which she could be then judged.
And it was the means by which she could impose her will upon others as well. Kindness became a form of steel.
A cudgel.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that when we get to COVID. The other thing I think that was really interesting was because you're right, there has been why, if God is omnipotent and omniscient, this is ironically why I left Catholicism, but if God is omnipotent and omniscient, and there is evil and cruelty in the world, then this is not a new concept. I mean, we're going to go back to the Epicurus trilemma. I mean, this is in the thousands of years people have been grappling with this. But Ardern, from your reading, didn't seem to grapple intellectually with that concept at all. There was just an immovable rock and she just said, "Oh well, I'm just going to go around it. I'm not going to confront intellectually the idea." And that also, there's a reference there from Rebecca Chambers, who came away from a meeting with her at some book club, Catherine Mansfield House, I think, and she's saying, "I don't think Jacinda reads." Deborah Chambers, sorry, came away with the view that Jacinda Ardern doesn't read books.
Well, there are a few things to tick off there, Damien. One is, I think she did grapple with the problem of evil. She wrote about that in her memoir, and I quoted her to that effect. The thing with the problem of evil, here I'm just speaking personally, is that the answer to the problem, how can a loving, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-knowing, all-loving God allow, even by default, the death camps?
Yes.
There is an answer. The answer is we don't know. That's the ultimate answer. Anyone searching for a yes or no is going to be disappointed. I think she did struggle with that. The fact she's not a reader was a problem. There's a whole library, as you would know, with authors and biblical scholars that have grappled with the subject. So that wasn't her style. In a way, her explicit appeal to emotionalism is the appeal of someone who doesn't read books, because it's an unnuanced manner of approaching life, that you're either on this side or that. You're either on the good emotional side or the bad emotional side. It's reductive and binary and destructive.
That actually gives our politician a degree of strength, perversely. Ignorance is strength. And I think we saw that with Ardern. Because there was a lack of nuance in a way that perhaps Bill English would not have, because English is a very deep thinker.
Absolutely.
Once Ardern had made up her mind, particularly on things like the COVID stuff and the guns, there was no nuance. There was no uncertainty. She had formed an emotional opinion, and she took us with her on that journey. And in a way that I don't think Bill English could have done so.
Yeah, Bill is. I say Bill. I know him. I've known him longer than anyone in my life.
Oh, really?
I've known him since I was 12.
I look forward to the book on Bill English.
Could do a good one. And he's full of nuance. He really is. He's a fascinating fellow and also an extraordinarily well-read person, as you would probably know. The footnote to add about Jacinda here is that I think she was, my view is that she was motivated in childhood, in adolescence, and in politics by missionary zeal.
Yes.
That's my key for understanding her.
Which became almost a messiah complex in the end.
It became an ecclesiastical concept, and we can talk about that more with COVID. But that is picture perfect missionary zeal.
Let's come back to that. I want to talk about you write about her early years going to, was it Waikato University, where Brian, did she ever meet Brian Gould?
I don't know. She would certainly have been aware of Gould.
Is Brian still alive?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. He would be mid-80s now.
Okay. I interviewed him. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He was really interesting. She goes to the United States. She was staying with a Mormon couple. 9/11 happened. She goes to London. There's something I don't understand. That is, she was in London. Grant Robinson. So she and Grant Robinson had been working for Ardern. You write that she and Robinson were working for Clark, or working in Clark's administration. You write that she saw Clark and Cullen working closely together, which perhaps formed part of the later relationship she had with Robinson. She goes overseas, but then she gets a call from Phil Goff. She would have been in her mid to late 20s at this point.
22.
So she entered Parliament, she was
20s.
about 28. I don't understand. There's one thing I don't quite understand. Why did Phil Goff call her? What she must have had. She failed to win the seat, but she got a winnable place on the list. Even at that age, in her mid to late 20s, after working as a relatively junior staffer inside the Clark administration, what was it about her that made somebody like Phil Goff make the phone call? She must have had a degree of charisma that we recognise now, but we're talking 15, 20 years ago.
Well, of course, we can only speculate. I would suppose that Goff recognised in her attractiveness, her natural intelligence, her likeability, and also Labour's desperate need at that point. Don't forget the Clark administration was on the way out.
Yeah.
To freight in young blood, that would have been a motivation as well.
So they were hunting around for the next generation?
And if I were Goff, I would have called Ardern as well. What wasn't to like? She was a young socialist. Of course, she's not a socialist. It's absurd. But her brand, her emerging brand, was the young socialist leader.
That's true, because she actually had that job at the International Socialist Union, or whatever they called it.
That voluntary position, yeah.
Yeah.
And went to a lot of parties.
Yeah.
Parties, not capital P.
Yeah.
Parties, but attractive, likeable, conversational most of the time.
Electable.
Electable, and don't scare the horses style.
Yeah.
At that point. That was precisely what Labour needed.
And that's what they were looking for, and that's so they tapped on the shoulder.
That was very smart of Goff.
I just find, in my youth, I used to kick around some political parties, and I just find it very interesting that somebody like that could be that the organisation would reach out there and tap her. I interviewed Marilyn Waring, and she was talking about the challenges she had to get selected for the seat that she ran. It was
hugely.
Very, and it's kind of interesting the contrast. I mean, it's 20, 30 years ago previously before but that change in culture and time. And also perhaps it's a reflection of the relative death of political parties, whereas when Marilyn Waring was trying to get into office, political parties were large and had large population base. Now they seem very hollowed out from what I've seen.
I think Marilyn was the fourth or fifth female MP in the history of the country. Jim Bolger talks about this in the book I did with him. Don't forget it was a different system where women had to win electorates, rural electorates in her case. Her sexuality was an issue. You have to admire her. What a trailblazer. Marilyn Waring. The National Party was more radical in tapping her, and then later Ruth Richardson, than the Labour Party was in tapping Ardern. By that stage, it had sort of flipped, where it wasn't so much that there could be an issue having a young woman, it was the burning necessity to have one.
I think Jim Bolger wasn't a fan of Ruth in the end, so the impression I get. He fired her.
Kind of. Yeah, I know, but then
utterly disgraceful.
Yeah.
When you talk about the night of the museum, where was Ardern politically at that point?
Well,
2011, I think.
2011 was, so for listeners, viewers, that's when I met her at the Auckland Museum. And Russell Brown, the Auckland commentator and journalist, brought us together to talk about life on the margins, quote unquote. I'd just done a book about the residential system for kids, state-run residences.
Little Criminals?
Little Criminals.
Yeah.
And I wrote about a Puni Boys Home. So I guess where I used to live. And I guess that kind of put me on the margins. And Russell also wheeled in Jacinda. And I was a little confused what the margins were. She seemed a thoroughly middle-class young woman by temperament and background and experience. Nothing wrong with any of that. But that's where we first, parlayed.
And I like that you're right that I think you were saying with respect, and she told you off for it.
Yeah, and she was right. When someone says with respect, well, what they mean is with no respect. So she had a point.
But the thing I thought was interesting in you telling that story is, I don't know the rest of the conversation. I suspect that you probably had a lot more to contribute to that topic than she did. But she put you in your place. She exercised a degree of power by saying, dude, you need to stop saying that, which would have, despite the fact that I suspect she was talking fluff and you were talking from experience having written the book, she just had that power to win the room, even when there wasn't a lot going on. That's the impression I get from from your telling of that story.
Yeah, with respect, Damien. No, I'm just joking. I was outclassed.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
So what we were toing and froing on was the causes of criminality.
Yes.
We should add that she was Labour's youth affairs spokesperson, whatever
what that means.
That fucking means. And she was putting forward the view that the right policy, the right government agency, the right analysts will deliver better social outcomes.
Yes.
I'm pretty simple. I think father absence is the single biggest contributor to young men going off the rails.
She didn't like that.
She didn't like that. My arguments were better. This is a subject I know intimately well.
Yeah.
I don't mean in terms of testimonial. I've researched it academically as well as, journalistically. So I had the better arguments, but she was the better arguer.
Yeah.
And it became apparent the audience was with her.
Yes.
And it's not like they didn't like me, but she was carrying them through her presence.
Yes.
This happens. And I learned a lesson.
That was, and I think that was, because I think you opened the book with that, and I think that's kind of the key insight that we have with that. She had that power. She had that ability to move. And because I was saying before, I think in some ways this book isn't so much a book about Jacinda Ardern. It's a book about New Zealand and our reaction to Jacinda Ardern. I was trying to get a kind of a feel for historical parallel, and I'm kind of caught. She's almost a combination between Chaucer Gardner and Evita Peron. We fell in love with Jacinda Ardern. I was talking to a woman last night, and she was still in awe of Jacinda Ardern, the importance of empathy. And I pushed her a little bit. She kind of considered, oh yeah, well, the outcome wasn't great, but she really cared. And that was important to her. The outcome of her administration wasn't. It was a bit like that debate you had with her.
I think I'm really cautious using words like we, but if I can be excused for a moment, I think the culture fell into a very large vat of treacle with her. And yeah, I see this heavily researched book as a book on the culture and something of a service to journalism, I hope. But the point with Jacinda was she was the right person at the right time, because not only local culture, but global culture was moving to a much more emotive and emotional place, a place where you like, as they say on Facebook, or not like
Yes.
things, and there's nothing else. A world where you either feel one way or you feel another. A world in which people don't read books or even reason. It's all binary. And her style, and I don't mean this to diminish her, the reason she's successful is because she can do the emotional style so well. She doesn't do the other stuff.
You're right, her style is her substance.
Yes, yeah, that is my view.
There is another little anecdote in the book which is so entertaining and revealing. You talk about Dane Giroux, and he did a video with Ardern, which he hasn't released, of Ardern pretending to be a nurse and giving a rectal exam and saying, only I know the temperature of the nation. And I haven't seen the video, but you can visualize Ardern camping it up, having fun, enjoying herself, having the self-awareness to know about how her behaviour is impacting not just Dane, who apparently said, you'll be Prime Minister one day after the encounter, but how her behaviour was going to impact on people who might see the video. And it kind of goes back to that interview you did with her, that ability for her to intuitively understand the impact that she was having on others.
Her EQ, if we can put it that way, or as David Seymour put it to me, her 1 in a billion ability, billion would be, to communicate intuitively. Of course, that doesn't make one flawless. And I think on a more humdrum level, you could certainly argue that she fell prey to the very familiar political temptation of, or she succumbed to the good notices from the coterie that she...
So what do you mean by that?
Well, that she may have had an almost unique EQ, the ability to read the room, whether it's with a up-and-coming Auckland scriptwriter or in front of the museum crowd with me in Auckland. Unique in that respect, but a little more humdrum. She was, she had the same ability as any of us to fall prey to her own good notices.
So she didn't, because the other thing from some of my conversations with the people around her at the time, very quickly in her premiership, the people around her who would tell her no were sidelined. And she ended up very quickly surrounded by people who were in awe of her orbit, wanted things from her. That's not unique to Ardern. I think that happens to a lot of people in power. I think it's certainly happening to our current Prime Minister. But I think with possibly somebody with Ardern's lack of intellectual curiosity, might be a little bit hard, but she didn't read books. She had that missionary zeal, a stripping away of people. The rumour is people like Andrew Little were kind of sidelined because he was willing to say, hey, no. And that's how we ended up in the situation we ended up with COVID and mandates.
As a snap summation, I'd go along with most of that. To be fair, COVID necessarily required, for an arguable amount of time, some sort of cohesion. If you're locking down a whole nation, then there has to be some agreement on that. And I think an argument could be made, I'm not making it, but it could be made, that for a few months it was, the opportunity for the nation to have a symposium about the rights and wrongs of lockdown was not good. But of course, while that argument could be made, it becomes more and more difficult the longer one's talking about, and when you're talking about years of this studied uniformity, this rather brutal uniformity, it becomes quite repellent.
So before we got to COVID, we had the mosque shooting, and I'm going to disagree with you. You refer to several other cases, shooting in Florida and others, where right-wing political men respond, you think, adequately to the crisis. I think New Zealand was fortunate that Ardern was there. I think Ardern's, because she did care, and I think she absolutely did. Her emotional response to that was genuine, and I think she carried not just New Zealand, but the world and the world's reaction to us in a way that Judith Collins, for example, could not have done so. Bill English could not have done so. They would have said or done a lot of the similar things, but intuitively we would understand that Judith Collins or Bill English would have had a very different emotional reaction to Ardern. And that's where the style is her substance, I think, was significant. Am I reading what you said correctly, or?
I think that's a fair point. I'm not sure I'd go quite the distance you have. There was a worse tragedy, numerically, in Christchurch, of course, but with the earthquakes, and the last one in particular. I think John Key and Bill English rose to that occasion pretty damn well.
Yeah, it was a different. They were very different in nature because the Christchurch earthquake was an act of God. The shooting was not, and
Correct.
making. And you
I agree. The analogue is difficult, but it's not groundless. If we're looking at the question, would any other leader have risen to the moment? And you've half said, yeah, that they would, albeit in a different style. I think Key in particular would have, or Clark, would have responded with horror, with feeling.
Would it be interesting to see how Ardern would have reacted if it was Gloriavale that would shut up? I think that were a synagogue. I think that would have been particularly.
If it had been a synagogue, she wouldn't have dressed up from, I assure you. But that's a different subject.
Another. Although, what did she describe herself? Having Eastern European heritage.
Well, that's interesting. I spoke with a I don't know whether he's still active as a preacher, but a pretty brilliant preacher in his time, Marcus Ardern. He pronounces his name a little differently. So you've got Ardern and Ardern. Anyway, Marcus says that one of the far-flung, by which I mean third or fourth cousin, I think third, there's a branch of the family where there is some Jewish. There, I mean, he has no reason to exaggerate, or misrepresent that, and it's no bad thing being Jewish. So that was kind of interesting, and for me, with my background, what I do know is that if you have forebears that went to Great Britain in the 1800s, and they're described as East European, that almost always means Jewish. That's shorthand for the Pale of Settlement. And of course, for listeners, we're talking about this because it's just an extra little dimension to Jacinda's, history.
She says that some of her ancestors were Eastern European, which I don't think we should read too much. I think we've been a little bit unkind.
But a biographer would want to look at that, just in passing.
Yes. So the reason why I talk about the mosque shooting and her reaction to it, I think you don't actually mention in the book, but the movement, the political reaction of the guns, I think was significant. I think she was wrong to do it, but I thought that was really interesting. She saw, and I think she did that because she believed it was the right thing to do, seizing the guns. But then we go from there. I'm going to skip over White Island, whatever. I don't think that's significant. Then we get to COVID, and because I'm interested in your reaction that when COVID initially happens, and because initially there was some hesitation to lock down because there was some event in Christchurch you wanted to go to, and there was some criticism.
That's right.
But when the decision was made to lock down, she becomes evangelical. I think her decision was because, remember at the time there were people like Derek Henley and so forth saying, there's 84,000 deaths. And
it's not Derek Henley. That's
he's a CTO
the epidemiologist, Sean Hendry.
Sean Hendry, sorry. So and Simon Bridges was also, he was saying, hey, we need to close the border. So the border was closed. So we're talking, March, April 2020. By the middle of the year, I think it was reasonably clear that the worst case scenarios wasn't going to happen. But then she had committed, she had taken the country on this journey. We moved from flattening the curve to elimination. Was there it seems to me, reading your book, there was an evangelical mission that crept into the way that she ran that process?
There was an ecclesiastical style to how it was handled. The podium of truth, what we used to call a pulpit, the council of wise elders, that is the advisors behind her, the parishioners in the pews, that is the general public, the team of 5 million, but also the deaconage in front, that is the media. This is all very churchy. This is all, religious with a small r. And that possibly circles around your question, like how do we move from social distancing and flattening the curve, making sure the hospitals aren't overrun like Northern Italy, to this open-ended, ongoing elimination strategy, which apparently had no exit plan to it. And I'm trying to be fair here. Don't forget that same year, she went to the public. She said, this is a COVID election. There's no other issue. Support us or don't support us. That's on this one matter. And she garnered the biggest vote in the history of proportional representation, my vote being one of them.
Including yourself, yeah.
So we've all got to be truthful.
Do you regret that vote?
No, I felt I made it on the best information I had. The best information was what we had from academe, what scholars were saying. And what they were saying was that if this beast gets into Fortress New Zealand, there'll be, Henry said 80,000 deaths, but that was built on, it was like suddenly 100,000. Like life as we knew it was about to be wiped out. I've got no expertise. And I still had, but I had more of a faith and expertise then than I do now. So do I regret it? No. Do I regret voting for the party Ardern led rather than the one Judith Collins did? No, not particularly. Did I suffer buyer's remorse? Yes, I did. Severe case. Almost as bad as getting COVID.
I want to talk about the abuse in state care.
Oh, good.
You touch upon this. This is, you make really excellent point, which has not been covered in the media. The headline number of 256,000 is garbage. It is not based on fact. It is utter rubbish.
It's a fantasy.
It is a complete fantasy, and it was reported. And when you read the report, it is obvious there was something like 6,000 actual children abused. They ramped that up to a maximum, I think, of, based on 5 to 1, there was 36,000 or whatever it was. To get to the 256,000, they basically went overseas and picked some numbers and whatever. Why do you think the report, the Royal Commission, came up with the numbers that it did? And why did nobody challenge it? Because nobody... I have a personal axe to grind here, which I won't say on air. But
no, I'm delighted that you've going into it.
There is, I have my own view about what happened, but why do you think the Royal Commission came up with that number? We know how it came up with that number. It just went overseas and grabbed the number. Why did it come up with that number, and why did nobody challenge it at
I'm
the
not
time?
sure. Did they go overseas?
In order to get the 256, they said, oh, we don't have enough data in New Zealand, so we're going to go over and we're going to see what was the level of abuse in state care from some orphanage in Wales. This is the level of analysis. It was shoddy. And they said, oh, according to the study that we found someplace in Wales, it was like 17% or whatever that was. And then they extrapolated that from that, and they applied that to New Zealand. And they came up with this nonsense high level of 40%.
If you took 17%, you'd end up with 3,500 cases of abuse in New Zealand, because probably about 20 to 25,000 kids and young people went through state care.
But this was extended to churches and everything. Is that
the oranges and...
I know. But
so they said in state care, more than 200,000 kids and young people, the number, of course, is mathematically impossible in a small nation, were abused.
Yes.
And I can categorically, and this does lead back to Jacinda, I can categorically say that that is falsifiable on every front.
So why did they do it?
Oh, it was moral panic.
And why?
It was moral panic.
And why did nobody push back?
Informed by the what was the dominant and what still is, unfortunately, pretty influential ideas about colonization, about the hierarchy of victims, about the inherent iniquities of capitalism, and how
abuse and state
the
care.
historical models need to be burnt down. And so you have all those things, plus a lot of people during the pandemic with an awful lot of time on their hands, and they combusted into this moral panic about a history which in fact never occurred. I know, I wrote the book on the history that helped spur the Commission of Inquiry that Jacinda called.
I'll give you my impression, because I read the report when it came out, or parts of it, and I realized this is rubbish. This report is it is a work of fiction. But I hadn't, until I read your book, your book gave me the idea, or put the idea in my head, tell me if I'm wrong, that I think it was a cult of Ardern. She made herself the Minister for Child Poverty or something. It was imperative at the time that we find abuse in state care. It was part of the Jacinda, you called it Jacinda media. I think it extended a bit further than the media. I think we got caught in a moral panic and we had to find it. And I wonder whether we would have had a similar outcome if somebody like Bill Inglis or John Key had been Prime Minister.
Unfortunately, I think we would have. I'm going to push back and defend her here.
Yep.
I think on that matter, she was really well motivated. That is, she wanted to find out what happened,
Yep.
why it happened, and to find and agree on some formula for redress for genuine victims of abuse. She called for a Royal Commission of Inquiry, which, as you know, is completely independent of the government. From there on in, it wasn't like she was behind the curtain telling the commissioners who to call, who to subpoena. Well, in fact, they subpoenaed nobody, or the broad direction of their inquiry. Grant Robertson, it's true, signed off on more funding for this exercise, but that's a separate subject. I think Jacinda was well-intentioned.
No, I'm sure she was, but in that environment, I think it would have been untenable for the Commission to come back and say, we've found very little evidence of systemic abuse in state care and Christian care, and whilst there were certainly
Except
cases,
Lake Alice.
whilst there was abuse, the idea that 40%, that I think if they had come out with a report, the Royal Commission come out with a report and saying, yes, there were some isolated incidents of bad actors, but by and large, the people working in this area were good people doing God's work. I think in the environment that we were living in, that would have been an untenable result. And I think the Commission...
Why? We can say it now.
No, we can say... Well, no.
You and I can say it. I've written about it.
I couldn't say it.
We can say that all of the above, that the people that worked in these institutions were liberal for the most part. Some were Christian, some were Maori.
The organisations themselves didn't push back. The Catholic Church, I mean, they made a demand that the Pope apologise. The organisations themselves that must have known that they were not systemically abusing children did not feel that they could push back against this report. There was a real culture of fear is the wrong word, but there was a culture in which
it was just mania.
Yeah,
I would say mania. And here's one metric, metric of the mother of all metrics. How many prosecutions? How many investigations, and prosecutions followed from the ludicrously long Royal Commission of Inquiry?
I don't know.
In a similar exercise in Australia,
what is the answer?
they were in a similar exercise in Australia. There were 5,775 investigations. In New Zealand, the answer is 6 investigations and no prosecutions. Just think about it in empirical terms. Nothing.
Yes.
The Royal Commission has huge powers. It can subpoena people from here, there, and everywhere. Why did it not do that? Why were none of these abusers named?
This is, and this I think is the insight that I gained from your book. Thinking about that Royal Commission, thinking about that outcome. You're right. The Royal Commission is independent, and they had the power to do what they were required to do. But will somebody rid me of this turbulent priest? The Royal Commission knew what was expected of them, and they did what was expected of them, and they did so. They ignored the facts, they ignored the evidence, they went out there to get the result that they knew that the Prime Minister wanted. And I think that is Jacinda's legacy, I think. There was a taint in the culture that permeated everything, and that the ability to say the mandates were wrong, that we've gone too far. There was, you talk about Jacinda media, and I don't think the Public Interest Journalism Fund, I don't think the media were corrupted by the Public Interest Journalism Fund. I think that collectively we got into this space. We were led by Jacinda. We wanted to be led by Jacinda. And any dissent to what was happening became impossible for a period of 3 or 4 years. And the Royal Commission was a direct manifestation of that cultural power that she wielded in a way that I'm not even too sure she understood.
You could be right. I'm just going to be a little more charitable to her.
Well, you're a more charitable person.
Possibly. I think the cultural forces, insofar as they were there at the Royal Commission and other related matters, were global, not just a cult of personality around one person.
Because you talk, in defence of your argument, you talk about what happened in Canada.
Exactly. And so for listeners, very quickly, in Canada, many will recall that, I certainly recall because I wrote about it, it was said that the graves of hundreds of Indigenous children had been discovered in Manitoba, and these kids had been slaughtered or they had died in care and had been buried in the most horrid way by their colonial overlords. And this was a sensation of a story. Justin Trudeau ordered the flags to be flown at half-mast for the next 6 months. Journalists were horrified. I was horrified. The only problem with this explosive story is that it was a hoax, and they never found a solitary body anywhere. It was just part of the insanity.
So in defence of your argument and why I might be wrong, that the desire, that cultural woke movement to find this stuff means that even without Jacinda, that Royal Commission may well have come with a similar result. So I may be being unfair. Have you seen the Jacinda movie?
No.
Prime Minister?
No.
See, I watched that movie in preparation for this interview. It was...
You took one for the team. Thank you.
I took one. It was interesting. It is worth seeing it. And that's where I came up with the kind of if you can imagine what it would have been like to interview Evita Peron, that's the sense I got. It was a real window. This was the version of Jacinda Ardern that she wanted us to see, and it was because you write somewhere in the book, Jacinda Ardern was concerned about would she be an empathetic leader. She was very concerned about that. She wasn't so concerned about whether she could be effective. That wasn't her emphasis.
No, she didn't care about policy. There were a couple of areas. Well,
neither did New Zealand didn't care.
Well, we can not, again, we're getting into the we word, but the majority of people can, quote unquote, not care for only so long. And then you start dealing with data. You start dealing with inflation. You start dealing with absenteeism, with crime and so on and so forth, and the economy, national debt. You can play the emotional game. In relationships, we call it romance, courting. Of course, you don't think about the practicalities of power bills and raising children, and God intends it that way. But you can't go through an entire relationship that way. And
that's a nice
that
analogy.
Was the problem.
That's a nice analogy. You write in the book, the Prime Minister who built bridges between people would find it much more difficult to build bridges for people. And I think that's a nice analysis or summary of Ardern's. Let's talk briefly about her next step. I think it was Matthew Houghton who wrote that for a lot of people, it was enough for Jacinda to be who she is. You talk about triangulation, the ability of Jacinda to put herself between the people and the solution. You write, I think it was you who was writing, that the reason why she hasn't expressed an opinion on Gaza is because she is trying to avoid taking a stance because maybe she envisions a higher role for herself. You write, or you quote somebody as saying that of the 42 former premiers of New Zealand, or however many there were, 42, that none of them could walk into a pub and be recognised in London, but Jacinda Ardern.
Well, that was Brendan O'Neill's words.
Brendan O'Neill.
He's the former editor of Spiked. He's a pretty well-known commentator with The Spectator and The Mail.
So where to next for Jacinda? Will the world fall in love with the Jacinda the way we did?
No. When Karl Popper came to New Zealand in 1939, I think, from Austria by way of London, one of the first things he wrote back to, I think it was Bertrand Russell, who had recommended him to work at Canterbury, was that his impression was that New Zealand was the most easily governed nation on earth.
And you're right, that was not a compliment.
And that was not a compliment. And Jacinda Ardern, or Ardernism, was a beneficiary of that to some degree. This is quite a demure society.
Although we've changed a lot in the interim, but I think
we probably got worse, in my opinion, with the eclipse of religion, which is, traditionally is at its best given people a critical framework for kicking back.
Yes,
that's gone. So as Chesterton warned, we're a society where people believe anything, and that's a true disaster. On to Jacinda's ambitions for the UN, which I think are definitely there. The past year we've seen what can only be described as a marketing campaign, and I think the end of that is her desire to lead the UN as Secretary General. Whether she'll get the backing of the New Zealand government or not is an open question.
I think Chris Luxon would support her.
I don't think his coalition partners would.
No.
They're talking about it, though. It is at discussion level. Is the rest of the world as easy a sale? Can Jacinda sell herself to the rest of the world as adeptly as she did in New Zealand? No. I mean, just common sense. It's not even deep analysis. You've got to take China with you. you've got to take Russia. You've got to take Europe and the Middle East. These are hard sells. They're not.
But they may prefer somebody. Weak is perhaps an unfair term, but they may prefer somebody more malleable, like Ardern, than somebody a bit more robust. I mean, certainly they're getting a lot of traction with, and what's his name, Guerreras?
Mm-hmm.
He's a loathsome individual.
Mm-hmm. At this point, we can only speculate. You could be right. I think taking the Trump administration, Britain, China, Russia, Arabia, Israel, Africa, take all those countries with you just by projecting an air of good feeling. And the UN is a brutal organisation. If she were to get to Turtle Bay in New York...
Sorry, where is Turtle Bay?
That's where the UN is. The building.
Headquarters.
It's in Turtle Bay. It was when I visited it. Every negotiation is messy, stuff has to be compromised and I's dotted, T's crossed. Helen Clark would have been pretty good at it.
She didn't get the job.
Ardern doesn't care about all that stuff.
But
she's not in.
But that's why the Chauncey Gardner analogy works, I think, because people project onto Ardern what they want to be there, and we can, each of us individually, because you made the comment that you liked Ardern more, you respected her less.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we, and again, I just relaying the conversation I had with somebody last night, a young woman, and she's a business owner, she's a serious person, and she acknowledged that, she wasn't too sure that Ardern did a good job, but it was important to her that Ardern cared, and that was enough for her. And I think that might be the magic that. Well, I hope it doesn't. I think she will be terrible at that role. The other interesting thing, because you have a series of statistics at the end of the book, which are damning, because on all of the objective metrics by which we should assess leaders, Ardern's prime ministership was a failure.
On basically every policy front, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Child poverty, economics.
Went down, absenteeism went up, the cost of living went up, inflation, even allowing for COVID.
And there was an interesting bit in the movie Prime Minister where there was some criticism of Ardern internationally, and her response was, she pushed back and said, because they're angry at me because I put lives ahead of the economy or lives ahead of money. And the vacuousness of that response it really hit me. She did not understand what she was doing economically, the economic carnage that resulted from that, the lockdowns, and because you look at the steel that she had when she went for the mandates, and there was because I think it's at one point she said one death is one death too many, talking about COVID. There was that, the kindness, her need to be kind became a weapon of control, and it was a little bit frightening. And then all of a sudden she left.
Yeah, Rodney Hyde makes that latter point. Perhaps you even talked with him about it, that you can, using the be kind argument, you can argue anyone down. I want to ban cars and driving because one death on the road is one death too many.
It's good for horses.
Do you not care? And you can apply that to anything. And in democracies, the tradition is that we trade off. Everyone knows that or should know that. But for some reason it was forgotten on many fronts.
One of the, because you make the comment about media being co-opted, one of the things I'm enormously proud of with Stuff is the Stuff continued to run my columns, and I was incandescent with rage at what was happening through the lockdowns. And although they took the Public Interest Journalism Fund, they just But I think there was very few people who were critical of what was happening at the time.
But if I were interviewing you, Damien, the obvious question I would ask is, do you feel you were being used as a fig leaf?
By stuff.
Because you're their quote-unquote libertarian contributor. It's made quite clear you're a contributor, you're an outsider. But you could be useful in that you can be given as Exhibit A for a certain fairness, a certain intellectual diversity. Unfortunately, there's no Exhibit B at the moment.
Am I a fig leaf used by staff to create the impression of balance? I would say no, because if I didn't exist, I don't think staff would recruit somebody like me. I think I was picked up by Jonathan Milne, who I used to write for when he was at the Herald on Sunday, and he recruited me to staff when it was the Sunday Star Times. And so I think I have become staff has inherited me as a legacy, and they have made the decision to keep me on. And I think so am I a fig leaf? I would say no, because if I was to leave, or if they were to fire me for some reason because I got into disgrace, I don't think they would go and get another right-wing or libertarian person to. I think I'm there and I'm part of the furniture. And
okay,
but I don't know what goes on in the upper reaches.
And the second question I would ask very quickly is this, and it interests me. You use the word "we" a lot. Use it more than I do.
In terms of New Zealand, yeah.
Okay, in terms of New Zealand. So we responded to this about Ardern. We wrote our greatest hopes onto her portrait, as it were. What made you different?
Oh, cripes. Probably my libertarian beliefs. I make a joke, we were talking before about...
So anyone who's not a libertarian would have...
If you think about... Well, you look at the people who were protesting on the lawns at the end, right? I guarantee you the vast majority of them in April 2020 probably would have supported the lockdowns. Their views changed over time. I think for them, the mandates affected them. They thought about the vaccine, decided they didn't want to take it, and found that the state was telling them to do it. That was a front on their own agency, and they responded to how the state was treating them. I think that was a personal, and fair enough too. I'm not diminishing that decision. I think New Zealanders are inherently utilitarian. I think that that's the way we think. We are a collectivist nation in a lot of sense. And
so you're a utilitarian?
No, I'm not.
Oh, so you're not we.
I'm not a utilitarian at all.
You're not part of the we.
I think utilitarianism is fundamentally evil. The end point.
So why do you ascribe that to everybody else?
Why do I describe what to everybody else?
Utilitarianism.
Because when I look at the way New Zealanders, not just New Zealanders, but certainly the way New Zealanders think and the way because I include myself as part of New Zealand, and I am part of New Zealand despite the fact that I have different political views. I believe deeply in the country. But for me, the idea that I am responsible for my neighbour, and I will provide for my neighbour. My neighbour does not have a right to come in to my bank account and take my things for them. And this is the difference between a conservative and a libertarian. I believe that it is immoral. If my child is sick, I have no moral right to take your money to look after my child. You may feel a moral right to assist me, but I have no moral right to do so. The idea that the state is going to tell me that you must stay home to protect grandma I find that an anathema. Now, there is a There is a point at which I will accept if COVID had a 20% mortality rate, okay, fine, throw my libertarian opinions in the garbage. If we're dealing with the Black Death, all debts are off. If we are dealing with a foreign invasion, then libertarianism is of no use whatsoever. It's an the country faces an existential crisis. COVID was not an existential crisis. It did not get anywhere near the level where the state had the moral justification to do what it did. And I think that utilitarian collectivist impulse means that we looked at what Ardern was doing, and at no point did we think this is wrong. But if you come to
you've just made a utilitarian argument. You've said if it was at this point, if it was 20%, then yes, the state, the state could or would or should.
Yes.
Do something. Well, that's a utilitarian argument.
No, you are correct. There is a fundamental flaw in libertarian ideology. If you actually created a libertarian society, it would collapse in 5 minutes, because ever since human beings came down from the trees, and even before that, we have organised ourselves in political structures. So it is delusional. The libertarian perspective is fundamentally delusional, because it is simply it is in contradiction to the way human beings live. So I realise the irrationality of my own worldview, and so I suffer significant cognitive dissonance from that, and that is irreconcilable. But when I think about things like taxation, I think, okay, I would like people to think that, yes, taxation is theft, and we are taking people's money against their will. And so if we're going to take somebody's money against their will, the moral good that we are doing must, at a minimum, exceed the moral harm that we are doing by taking it. And New Zealanders don't do that. We simply look, we need to look after Johnny. He needs to go to school. We never consider about the moral wrong about taking the assets off. And so part of what I think I like to do as a libertarian is force people to think about those trade-offs. There was a Thomas Sowell who said there was no solutions, only trade-offs. And I think we don't think about those trade-offs. So in terms of COVID, if we were dealing with the Black Death, then the trade-off becomes so stark that you have to throw your principles in the bin, because you're not going to have a society at the end of it otherwise. But even when you were talking about the original mortality rate was so de minimis, I did not think that the reaction of the state was justified. So that's
yeah, we should do another podcast sometime. I've read Ayn Rand back to front.
Oh God,
many times.
Brilliant thinker, terrible writer,
and fiction in particular. But that's a whole subject. I'm not sure how libertarian you are, but we'll leave that. I'll park that for now.
Okay. Well, I did an interview with Stephen Rowe, and I challenged him. He said he was a libertarian. I said, "So, do you believe we should be able to sell heroin in the corner dairy?" And he said, "Good Lord, no." Whereas I think we should. I think Merck Sharp and Doane should be allowed to sell heroin to the general public. Mm-hmm. I don't think that state schools should. I don't think we should have state schools. I don't think we should license medical doctors. If it was up to me, I would abolish all occupational licensing, except for liquidators, of course, because now that I'm regulated, I think we need to maintain
entered into by consenting adults. So there's no liberal objection to that.
Anyway, so we're a little bit we're getting off track from Jacinda Ardern. David, I enjoyed the book. It was an excellent read. As I said, I think the value in this book, it is not. I don't think it's a book about Jacinda as much as it is a book about how New Zealanders responded to Jacinda. It's a window. It is a window into New Zealand as much as it is a window into Jacinda, and I struggle to understand Jacinda Ardern, and I struggle to understand what why we did what we did. But your book certainly helped. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.